thank you all for coming tonight. I think it's really important. Well, first off, I'd like to say hi to Tintin and Esther for coming all the way from Europe. Thank you. I think looking around, I know a lot of us know each other, and I think we're all part of that like global tattoo family, and it's really great to see people like you here. And it's also great to be in a museum like this. And I think, especially with the exhibition about like Lew the Jew, there's like certain communities that you don't like really hear about and things that were there. And I think, like a lot of people wouldn't have even realized Lew the Jew or Brooklyn Joe Lieber, that there's some of these like people that, Tattoo Foundation is built upon. So that said, I think all of us from our generation are really excited when tattooing gets into a museum. So when I was asked to, organize a panel, I really wanted to reflect like the rich cultural diversity in tattooing. And to that effect, let me introduce the four, these artistic powerhouses we have sitting before you. I'd like to start with Kari Barba. Kerry I've been tattooing 21 years, and she was already like a bona fide tattoo legend when I was apprenticing. Okay, like Ami and I were just talking about this in the car over here, like that samurai back piece you did, and it's just like, she's just like really put it down. Roxx also, I think we've known each other for over 15 years. Roxx has been putting it down from day one, and I also want to point out these are two examples of women who have used tattooing and furthered it, and used it as a vehicle for empowerment and cultural expression. Anyone who's turned on a TV is well aware of the guy who wasn't on Game of Thrones, Ami. But like all joking aside, aside from the pivotal role he played on Miami Ink., Ami also has been putting down for Jewish tattooing before and well after. So the original Hebrew hammer. And our fourth panelist, Adam Vu Noir. He's the youngest of the group, but I really think I chose Adam to be on this because like he represents like a new breed of artists. Like he just did a residency in Europe. He's been to all 7 continents. Like he's always creating things. He's a mixed media like talent, and so I think these four have really, I think encapsulate what's going on in tattooing today. And so that said, I'm just here to moderate. So I'm gonna let's hear from them themselves. Please give a round of applause for our panel. So let's just start with like a brief bio, like how long you've been tattooing, how you got started. Want to just go down the row?
Sure. So my journey in tattooing started in 1990. I basically ended up in Israel. I joined the Army in 1989. In 1990, I decided that I wanted to get a tattoo in Israel, and I went to get a tattoo in Tel Aviv. And Tel Aviv had its own cool, rich history of tattooing, but most of it came from Haifa, which was the port. And the Moskowitz brothers were there at one point. There was a lot of old school tattooers that were in Haifa constantly tattooing at the port, and mostly sailors. There was a lot of American sailors that were coming in, that were stationed there. And it was a really underground thing to get tattooed there. And I had the pleasure of getting tattooed by one of the Israeli tattoo artists, by a guy named Avi, which is a friend of mine and Tintin's as well. And he kind of walked out of the room and left the tattoo machine running, and I grabbed it and started tattooing myself. And at that point, I knew that this was what I wanted to do. I still had 2 years left in the Army to do, and I waited those 2 years to get started. And in 1992, I found myself back in Miami and landed an apprenticeship with Tattoos by Lew, which was Lew Scabaris. Funny enough is Lew always used to talk about Lew the Jew. He always used to have Jew jokes with me, and it was all out of love. But he was like, there was this guy called Lew the Jew, and you're the Tattoos by Jews here, and it was really cool because Lew was an old school guy and came up, in an old school traditional way, and kind of taught me a lot about where everything comes from. And I got really lucky to be there and under Mike Wilson and a couple of other great guys, and that was my start. It was 1992.
Kerry? I feel so old all of a sudden. No. I started tattooing in 1979, and it was kind of an accident. I actually moved into a duplex, and my downstairs neighbor happened to be a tattoo artist, and he hounded me for about a year, kept saying, you should really try this. I think you might be good at tattooing. You should look into it. And I'm going to be honest that at the time I had never seen a tattoo that I liked. I hadn't seen any that I thought were good, and I couldn't understand why they couldn't be better. Granted, I'd only seen 2, so that was my background, so it wasn't very good, but he talked me into it, so I finally did my first tattoo. I was 19, and I did a little rose and kind of started the ball rolling, and he kept bringing me more clients. He actually dragged me to his boss, Dave Yurku. You guys remember Dave Yurku? Yeah. So he wasn't very happy about that situation, He wouldn't even talk to me. He was like, why the hell did you bring her here, So he called me the next day, and he said, I think maybe I know a place you should go. And he said, there's this guy named Cliff Raven in California, and he's looking for an apprentice, and I think you should go. I had no idea who Cliff Raven was. I didn't know anything about tattooing at the time, so of course I didn't jump on that. And that was probably a mistake. But anyway, 1979, been tattooing ever since.
I started my tattooing journey in my hometown of London. I got my first tattoo illegally. I was 15, wasted. I was like a total punk rocker that just wanted a tattoo. And I went to the shop, and I had my own design, and they couldn't do it. They could only do what was on the walls. And I was like, wow, I could grab one of those machines and like do some serious, like different kind of stuff. So I decided after that to try and get an apprenticeship, which was impossible at the time. And I basically taught myself to tattoo. I've been tattooing approximately since the mid to late 80s, which is like over 30 years, which is crazy. I can't even believe that my hands still work. And I've been in San Francisco for 14 years, tattooing here, Amsterdam for 10, and then I just moved to LA about 3 years ago, which is where I tattoo now. Yeah.
All right. Oh, man. I'm so happy I'm going last. So I started, I got my first tattoo when I was 14 in 2001. I got a Misfits Crimson Ghost with 138 in camouflage because that shit was tight back then. And it's still fucking tight, But yeah, from that moment on, I was hooked. Basically, around that time, I was making a lot of flyers for shows. I was in a band for a few years, and I was in charge of making flyers. So that kind of taught me how to do compositions and stuff. But I was that annoying kid that was hanging out in all the local shops in Orange County, not ever having enough money to get tattooed or be legally allowed to get tattooed. So, yeah. But, I was hooked from that point. I knew this is what I wanted to do, except around that time, I think it was right before the shows started, and around the times the shows did start, it was really hard to get an apprenticeship. So, there was only about 15 tattoo shops in southern Orange County at that time. So, yeah, this is like right before MySpace happened. So that was like, it was really hard to find one. So you would just get turned away. But I was lucky enough to meet a friend over MySpace who took me in over in Rome. So I saved up for, about 6 months selling women's shoes at the mall. And then that was the last real person job I had. And I went out to Rome in 2007 for about 6 months, just learning how to be clean and all that stuff. But when I got back, I had compiled a bit of a portfolio of just like really shitty watercolor paintings and some oil paintings that I had done during that time. And I was able to get an apprenticeship at a Lowrider Tattoo with Jose Lopez. And from that point on, man, it was like, I wanted to be a traditional dude when I started, but like growing up like around there, everybody kind of has the same story of like, this is how I became a tattooer. It's like punk rock, skateboarding, gangster shit. It's like really nothing else in between. So, but I was able to kind of be a part of all that during that time, and yeah, so that's it. That was about 14 years ago. I've been tattooing 11 years now, so yeah, not as long as everybody else, so I feel kind of weird, but yeah, it's good.
Well, this is a kind of like an open, like a pretty big question, but for all of you, we want to talk about what are some of the drastic ways you've seen tattooing change. All of you have been here for at least a decade, some more, some less.
Double digits.
So yeah, let's talk about that. Like, how are some of, this can be positive or negative, but just ways you've seen tattooing change.
Well, I remember when I used to walk down the street, people would cross the street to get away from me because I had a head tattoo or a neck tattoo. I mean, people were scared. And now, it's totally commonplace. I mean, it used to be like this super hardcore underworld kind of feeling with it, right?
I remember the first time I saw tattoos, I was scared. It was me. I was the one. I was scared of you. I was like, oh, shit. I watch my language here, but I was nervous. I didn't understand it. So, I can come from both sides of that and look at it both directions, and, then becoming a tattoo artist, you start to see and you realize that it's an art, So for me, my turn on things is backwards because it was, I had the unnervy feeling of very tattooed people before I had the understanding of it, So I've seen that come through many stages, coming around then to where it becomes commonplace and we have TV shows.
I think for me, my father had tattoos, and they were all just these really shitty tattoos. And my father wasn't really there for a long time. I think my father left when I was about 6, and I never had a father after that. So my memories of him were always tied into the few tattoos that he had. And I was fascinated by it as a kid, just seeing these hand poke tattoos that he had. So my father, I guess he wasn't the best person growing up, so he did sometimes, so it was like jailhouse tattoos. But I was so fascinated by it, especially, I grew up in Israel, and I grew up in Israel till I was 12. And in Israel, tattoos was beyond taboo. It was just not something that you would see. So my father had literally tried to burn them all off with a cigar. Because it was really hard to be accepted in Israel at the time, not only with like these really shitty tattoos that didn't look professional, but it was also, I think, the majority of people looked at him as a criminal and definitely not as a Jewish person. So, at one point or another, I remember my father coming home and he had like these cigarette burns on top of it because he had some on his hands and he just cigarette burned everything off. And I was like, why would you do that? In my mind, I was like 6 or 7 years old. I was like, why would you do that? Those things were awesome, Like I grew up, it was normal. But it was funny because, when I was 12, when we moved to the States, I realized that tattoos were predominantly worn by either bikers, punk rock kids, people that were not really accepted in society as much. And I think that's what drew me into, because I was a punk rock kid, and we all grew up in this huge punk rock scene. And we started drawing tattoo imagery for punk bands, and that led me into just loving that imagery, and it all kind of blended together in my memories of what my father had. And, and even though I knew that it was going to separate me from society, I always wanted to be separated. And I always kind of wanted to be away from what the mainstream was. I think that's what attracted me to tattooing, is that I always wanted to raise my middle finger to society and just kind of do what I thought was going to be good for me. It just ended up, I'm sure Kerry probably has seen the transformation that is so much deeper than mine, considering she started tattooing in a time where, first of all, women were not tattooing. It was a very, very hard. And I remember, being in the tattoo shop in the early 90s, and Annette would come down and work at Lew's all the time. And I would just be like, oh, this woman, she's the shit, like she is the toughest bitch I've ever met, because she didn't take crap from anybody, and she was just this powerhouse, you know. And I just remember how hard it must have been for women to start tattooing at that time, and how unaccepted it was for us. And I couldn't even imagine what women had to go through to be tattooing at the time.
That's absolutely true.
Absolutely.
You know, in the beginning, I didn't really think about it as a male or a female thing. You know, back then it was just something that I started tattooing, and being that I had somebody who kind of helped me, you know, who said I should try it, I didn't see that side of it, you know. But coming through the years, you definitely see, and, you know, being in the shop and men would walk in and not want to get tattooed by a girl, you know, turn you down and, you know, say they'd rather have somebody they didn't even like the work and get that tattoo instead of getting the tattoo by a female. Yeah,
Or even worse, when they jump in there and get tattooed by you because you are a female, because, you know, this is some alone time.
Right, right. And then, you know, there were the times when, yeah, I only want a girl to tattoo me, and they, you know, get some kind of story or something going, but, you know.
For all the wrong reasons.
Right.
Yeah, I remember working in a tattoo shop in Scotland, and a guy walking in being like, can I speak to the tattoo artist, please? And I'd be like, you're speaking to her. And he just turned around and walk out. It's ridiculous. Wow. It's just like...
And now it's crazy when you see that, how much social media has just expanded upon that. It's like now we have safe spaces for tattoo studios. We have, I mean, Berlin, like every other shop is a safe space, and that's how they're advertising everything. And like, we've moved so forward, just even within the last 5 years, where everything's changed as well.
Yeah, I remember having to go and ask permission from a certain biker gang who's very well known to open my shop in Amsterdam. I mean, people can just go and get a lease now, you know, and open a tattoo shop. I mean, when I first started tattooing, it was like firebomb city if you did that.
I haven't heard about
yeah,
that happening.
firebomb. Oh,
You
yeah.
know what I'm saying?
anytime soon.
Firebombs.
Yeah.
Get in the car, we're going to take down the shop down the street because they're trying to open. Fire bombs, shoot somebody, those kind of things were commonplace.
Yeah.
You know, they were very normal.
That was tattooing, you know?
Yeah, I had my kids' lives threatened a few times just for trying to open in a city. You know, ended up moving to a different city. It would happen again, so I'd try a different city, you know, end up in many different places simply to protect them.
Yeah, I worked in a tattoo shop in Amsterdam where, because I left, because I was earning them so much money, they threatened to break my hands if I came back. And I mean, that was totally normal in tattooing. It was totally normal.
I feel very fortunate to have been involved in tattooing during that time where that stuff was still going on. So this is, again, it's like before social media, so you couldn't just put somebody on blast. Everything was word to mouth if some shit like that went down. I mean, I'm sure it still goes down, but as far as like Los Angeles goes, like that's not really going to happen. And if it is, there's repercussions, you know? So to see that in the transition now is like, it's bizarre and it's awesome though too. It's like everybody can kind of do their thing. You know, there's enough people in the world to get tattooed now, you know?
Well, at the time there wasn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know what I mean?
There
It's
was
like,
plenty
it's more or
of
less
people.
like, you know, there's, yeah.
Well, I think it sounds to me like what I'm hearing, and I think not just from our panelists, but also just in general from the tattoo communities, there's a certain sense of wistfulness, like, well, it used to be dangerous and scary and kind of cool, and now it's like mainstream, we're in museums and things, so we've made forward progress, but I think there's certain things that no one wants to go back to, but it sounds to me like there's elements that people miss about those days. Am I
Catch-22.
kind of, is that?
I honestly don't miss those days. Those days did not include me as a human being in tattooing. There was no way to get in. Absolutely no fucking way in. So I don't miss it. You know, if you were a woman, you had to fuck your way in, or, you know, do anything. I don't know, like pay people to apprentice. Whereas a white dude could just walk into a tattoo shop and it would be slightly difficult for him to get an apprenticeship. I'm glad to see a lot of the bad parts of those days gone, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're moving forward in a great direction in many ways, you know, and we're talking about the scary aspects of the way it was, but there's even the medical aspects of the way it was. Mm-hmm. You know, the change then. When I started tattooing, my first several years were barehanded. You know, I didn't wear gloves. We didn't use any protection at all. You know, and I know people who, you know, I mean, one story, for instance, we used to use a little steel bowl that we'd put the water in to rinse our needles with during the day, and we'd rinse in that same water bowl all day long, you know? And prior to me, they probably used that same water bowl all year long, you know? I mean, it's, you know, I mean, and I got tired of that feeling. I got tired of that blood and the grossness of it, you know, and finally decided to start wearing gloves, you know? So in 80, it was like 83, I put on a pair of gloves and never turned back.
Yeah, I remember in the even in the early to mid 90s, working in a very old tattoo shop in the red light district of Amsterdam, where at the end of the day, the floor manager would mop the floor and then use the bloody towels from the clients to dry the floor afterwards. And I used to wear this special pair of clogs that I used to take off outside the house and leave them there, and then I'd go out the house and I'd put them on and go back to the tattoo shop because I didn't want that going into my fucking apartment, you know.
How crazy is it that, like, in some places, like, you know, the underground tattoo scene, like in France, for example, if you tattoo like that with no gloves and all that stuff, that's considered cool. You know, that's a thing. It's like, well, it's kind of playing Russian roulette a bit, you know, but
It's a thing now?
it's in some places, it's kind of its own scene too, of like tattooing at graveyards, doing hand poke tattoos on top of Elvis's tombstone or something. And
See, I definitely go to bed too early. I didn't know
that's a
that.
thing. I seen it, man.
Well, Adam, over here in America, what we do, that's
That's right. I'm sorry.
well, so let me ask, Kari and Roxx, do you feel like, in that sense, do you feel also like a sense of, like, obviously you've both pioneered efforts for women, but do you feel a sense of responsibility, like a sort of social responsibility out there, or are you just inherent in what you're doing? Is that, you know what I mean? Like, I think you're already setting an example.
Yeah, I don't feel a sense of responsibility. I mean, I think it's cool if women look at me or Kerry and go, oh, cool, I can be a tattoo artist too. That's cool. That's just basic, though. Fucking you don't need male genitals to pick up a tattoo machine. That's just something I've believed in for a very long time.
Anybody can do anything, you know. It doesn't matter what you are, who you are, where you come from. Anybody can do anything. So I fell into this. I didn't know this was going to happen, but yes, I am very glad, you know, that I'm in this position and I'm helping other young women to move forward in the industry, and I'll continue to do that. But to me, I don't choose people because they're women or male or anything like that. But yes, I'm very proud to be doing so.
Yeah, I walked through fire to get into this, rather in the opposite way than Kerry. And I mean, I just think it's just what I do now. I mean, if it's an inspiration, great. I just do what the fuck I want. I never had to answer to someone apprenticing me or anything like that. So I like it that happened that way. And I think if I had an apprenticeship, things might have been a bit different, but a little easier maybe. But I like the hard fight, so it made me who I am.
Yeah, I didn't apprentice either, but I just had a friend who said, do it, you
Good
know,
for you.
give it a try. Yeah, which was definitely harder than most women. You know, he was I don't know what would have happened if he wouldn't have been there. I might not have been tattooing, I don't know.
So glad you did. You were definitely an inspiration to me.
All of us.
All of us, yeah.
Absolutely.
Adam, let's talk a bit. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, but like, and I think in sort of, you know, the Bay Area, or I guess the tattoo world as a whole, recently lost Lyle Tuttle, and I think one of the many things Lyle was known for was tattooing on all 7 continents, something you did. So maybe we can tell us a bit about why you did that, and you know, any thoughts on that?
I think it was kind of a thought I had when I was starting out in like my first year or 2 tattooing. It's like, oh wow, what if I ever did that? But I needed to do it because at that time, man, even now, there's just so many great tattooers out there and tattoo artists that like, it wasn't just trying to find something to separate myself. It was because I needed to learn. Like, I learned really early on that I was not going to be like one of the best dudes or whatever, or just accepted that, but I needed to try to gain knowledge by traveling, and I knew that tattooing was a ticket to go do that. It was the only way I could do that. You're only as good as the 5 people you surround yourself with, and you're the average of that. So to constantly change that every 2-3 months was so important to do. I made it very evident that I was the shittiest tattooer in the room every single time I guest spotted somewhere, because I needed to just get new eyes on my stuff. Everything, yeah. It really helped me build my confidence and things like that, but that was one straight year. I mean, I'd been on the road for about 5 years, but it was one straight year of just living out of a backpack, 3 tattoo machines, 2 pairs of pants, 3 shirts, a vest, and a jacket. And that was my entire life. I left the States with $8,000 and stretched that out as far as I could over the course of 365 days. And I mean, going all these places are cool, but then once you actually get to Antarctica, you're like, oh my God, I'm in fucking Antarctica. I forgot that I was doing it because, I need a tattoo there. Like, I need to say that. So no matter what anybody would ever think of my work or me or anything I ever did, they could never take that one aspect away from me, that I tattooed on all 7. You know, and Lyle did it. Lyle was the first person to do it, and he had written in an article that, the first 7 people get a 7 tattooed by me. Fuck, as soon as I did that, I was emailing the shop like every 3 months or something, but we never caught in, never got it. But yeah, it was really just the importance of gaining knowledge. If you look at all these tattooers out there, man, like they took chances, and taking those chances to gain knowledge, to better yourself, not just as an artist, but as a human being. Like, once you are going somewhere totally different, like, I don't know, it's a third world country, like, I don't know, Vietnam or something, and you see life from different eyes and a different perspective, it changes everything about you. It changes the way you look at things. And instead of looking at flash and tattoo imagery for reference or inspiration, you're picking shit up from street signs, you know, and like, you're making it your own. So I really learned that while on the road. I learned more on the road than I ever did in school, and any amount of school too. You know, and that's something like, creativity is awesome and all that great stuff, but in actuality, I just always felt like creativity can't be taught. You have to like go out there and go find it, you know. So yeah, I mean, that's why I do.
Business ethics. Yeah.
Business ethics.
Okay. Roxx, I think you know, all of us are familiar with, like, you're, I think, one of the big leading pioneers of what we call now black work tattooing. I think would be the term. So can we talk a bit about how you got into that and your role in that, and maybe even explain what that is?
I always feel really awkward when people say that, but I've done it a lot for a long time. I guess, Ed Hardy, that Samoan leg piece with the snake on the front cover of Tattoo Time, kind of changed my life. So when I started tattooing, that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to do black things all the time, black designs. I moved to Amsterdam and, you know, was greatly inspired, and still I'm super inspired by Henk Schiffmacher. You know, at his museum, he brought so many tattooers to Amsterdam. Samoan tattooers, Maori tattooers, you know, this was all that I thought about or cared about for 20 years. Did a lot of that work for constantly 7 days a week in Amsterdam for 10 years. Decided when I moved to San Francisco that it was kind of culturally appropriative, and wanted to change swap out using indigenous cultures designs for a graphic black language, a visual language, and started just making my own stuff up, really. I guess it's called black work now. Didn't really realize I was a pioneer of anything, honestly, but people do say that about me.
Most pioneers don't.
What?
Most pioneers don't realize.
Oh, okay. I honestly don't. That's why it makes me laugh. just like doing black. I've done a lot of color work in my life when I was in a position where I had to do all the work that came my way to eat and pay rent. So really enjoyed it, but my heart was always with black tattooing and trying to give off the feeling of indigenous tattooing without taking away cultural stuff from those people. So that's what I do now. It's getting more and more simple and crazy, and just love it. Years of it.
We all do. And I think you really have achieved that goal of doing something that looks inspired but not, imitated.
Thank you.
So, well, let's talk about Ami. So, I mean, I think any discussion on like the changing of modern tattooing wouldn't be complete without, Miami ink and whatnot. And I know you've got this questions you've been asked a lot, but let's start with that. Your role in that and how you think that's changed tattooing.
Wow. So, I mean, if there's one conversation that I hate the most, it's probably talking about a TV show that has definitely, I don't know, it's definitely affected the world of tattooing. It was not something that I thought was going to happen. We ended up doing something that we all thought was just going to be a complete failure and was going to be an advertisement for a shop for 5 tattooers that have been tattooing before that. Even though a lot of people, and thought that we popped up like a fucking polyp that same week. That's not the case, We were all tattooing together for 13 years previous to that happening. The tattoo show was not something that we pitched. It was something that the networks were looking for because at the time, reality TV was really more about a craft. They went from motorcycle building to car building to all these jobs that were odd jobs that people had not gotten a glimpse into that world, or so many things that were somewhat taboo, if you want to call it that. But we were probably one out of 150 artists that were, if you want to call it audition or whatever it was. I didn't fall into it because of that. At the time, I was tattooing with Shinji in New York. And me and Shinji had just left New York Adorn, and I went to work with Shinji. And I also had a bar. And I was pretty content about owning a bar and only tattooing because I love tattooing. And I was only tattooing 2 or 3 times a week. I was going to do my appointments in Shinji's shop, and I was trying to absorb more Japanese tattooing from Shinji. And one day, this guy comes up to me and he goes, listen, I want you to talk to this friend of mine. He's a producer. He wants to talk to you. He's looking for a tattoo artist. So tell him to come by the bar. If he wants to come talk to me, he can come by and, we can have a drink and talk about it, and maybe I can help him out. And I never thought it was about me or anything like that. So funny enough is the next day, the guy's already at my bar and comes up to me and he shows me a list of all these people. And he goes, I got footage of all these people. Would you recommend some of these people? And so I went through the list. I was like, you got some powerhouses here. And yeah, I was like, this guy's great. This guy's great. This woman's great. This guy's, whatever it was, that's what really how it started. And a couple of drinks later, we just started shooting the shit. And the conversation got deeper and deeper. And at the end of the conversation, he goes, you're the guy. And I go, I'm not the guy. I'm a bar owner. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I tattoo for a living, but not really, Like I do tattoos because I love tattooing. But it's like there's way better ways to make a living than tattooing. And a bar is one of them, and I really enjoy it. And he goes, no, but because you're that guy, you're a social guy. You're the guy that should have a show. I'm like, listen, man, I don't think this is for me. Long story short, 3 days later, he comes by again, and he goes, I really want you to just think about it and talk to your friends if you have some and see if they would be interested. And I remember just as he left, I called Chris Garver, right away, and I was like, Garvey, what do you think? Someone's going to do this, would you be interested in doing this? And he goes, hell yeah, we should. Somebody else is going to do it, and if anybody's going to do it, why shouldn't we have a fucking shop that we can market and promote? It's like nothing's going to come out of it because nothing like that existed. We really knew that at that point they were just going to use us like a freak show because we were just a freak show, to the everyday person. We're freaks, and there were dwarves later on and there were other people, and we just fell into that category where we were just not normal people. And I think anybody would have watched us. So if we were fucking painters, they would have been like a bunch of tattooed painters, a bunch of, we could have been painting houses for a living. It wouldn't matter. We were just out of the norm, and I think that's what really the networks were looking for. We ended up shooting a pilot literally 3 months later. And they took it away, and for 4 months we never heard nothing, and we just kept on going with our lives. And before you know it, one day we get a phone call, and they're like, we want you to shoot 6 episodes. We're like, great. We don't even have a fucking shop. And I was like, I was living in New York, and I was like, well, I can't afford opening a shop in New York because it's too expensive. It's like, if we're going to go back, I'm going to go back to Miami, where at least I know that I can get a shop and it's pretty cheap. And we went back, and at the time, there was a guy called Merlin. Remember Merlin? So Merlin had a shop, and Merlin had the shop right around Lew's shop, where I just grew up, but Lew had passed away, and I really didn't get along with Lew's management that took over after. And I said, you know what, I'm not going to open another shop. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to buy a shop, and I'm going to buy Merlin's shop, because I knew he was interested in selling it, because he was sick. He had diabetes, and he couldn't do it anymore. And so I came to Merlin. I said, listen, Merlin, I'll buy the shop. And we somehow ended up making a deal, and I bought the shop off Merlin. And I had shit-canned everybody in there that was robbing Merlin blind, and I knew that for a fact. And I just brought my crew, and we ended up shooting 6 episodes of something that we thought was just a fucking joke. We never thought it was going to go anywhere. And lo and behold, all of a sudden it became this fucking craze, and we got caught with whiplash. We had no clue that's what was going to happen. And before you know it, everything changed drastically. We were in shops where we were waiting for people to walk through the shop, and you literally buffed somebody to get him to get tattooed. Whatever you want, bro, just get tattooed, dude. I'll do anything. What do you want? Anything. I'll draw you anything. At a time that we didn't have computers, we didn't have anything. So it's like everything that you wanted to do, you had to draw. And all of a sudden, this whole thing came, and I remember after the 2nd episode came out, we walked outside the shop, and there was like 10 people waiting in the morning. We've never seen 10 people waiting unless it was Hank's shop, where people were waiting. But that never happened. But that was Hank's shop, And then all of a sudden, the next day, there was 15 people waiting. And then the next day, there was 20 people waiting. And then 2 months later, there was 150 people waiting down the street all the way around the corner. And they're all willing to get tattooed no matter what you wanted to do. And I was like, this is crazy. I've never seen this. And at the time, I was only tattooing 13, 14 years, but I've never seen anything like that. And I was like, this is just going to pass. This is too crazy for it to just catch on fire like that. But it did. And before you know it, 18 tattoo shops opened up on the beach. And to today we have over 1 million tattooers. It wasn't due to us. I'm not taking credit for anything, nor am I taking blame. This was the inevitable. If it wasn't us, it was going to be one of the other 150 people on the list. And it could have been way worse, because some of the people on the list might have been really colorful characters, but definitely not somebody that you wanted to build a show on. We were very careful. Like we all came from an old school background, so no teaching people how to tattoo. You know, like we would never explain how to tattoo or techniques on the show or all the things. Like we were willing to do all the bullshit drama just in order to keep the secrets of the business as much as we could. But that was inevitable either, you know, like eventually you could just open YouTube and learn how to tattoo. So things have changed so drastically from that point on, and I can't say that I'm responsible for it. It would have happened no matter what. We just ended up there, and if you want to call it the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the right time, you know. It didn't change who we were. It just, for me, it just kind of made me more of a hermit. I kind of went under, like it didn't hit me very well. I was kind of the guy that just wanted to be away from it all, you know. And we all took characters. We were basing the characters really on other shows. So I looked at American Choppers and I said, okay, there's the father that's always fucking angry, and there's the dumbass kid that's, you know, always just dumb as hell. And I was like, we all play these roles, you know. I figured, you know, I could be that angry guy, even though I told you I'm a pushover in my shop. So it's really funny how I ended up having this idea that I am the guy. But I guess that was part of the acting of it, you know. Like I was like, this is the character I could be because it's not me, and I could pretend to be this boss that really gives a shit if Yoji tattooed his head or not, you know. And all these, and it's funny how the whole world actually believed everything, besides the people that knew us and grew up with us and like were in the business and were like, oh, you guys fucking, what is this, you know? Like, that's what TV is. And it became crazy.
Well, let me ask you guys, the three of you, as people that we've all sort of seen this happen within our careers. So what are your opinions on it? You know, what changes did you notice as a result or not?
Kerry?
I think that, you know, in anything that happens like this, there's good things and bad things, of course.
Yep.
I think the positive things that came out of it are that it opened up an art to a world that knew nothing about it. And so now people see it as an art versus something that was hidden underground. And, you know, was it the right way for it to happen? We'll never know if that was the right way because there wasn't any other choice, right? So that's what happened. But I think that over time, people now look at tattoos and admire them versus being scared of them.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that, you know, it's inevitable. It was going to happen no matter who, no matter when. I mean, tattooing is such an interesting thing, and I agree with Kari totally. It's like so cool that it's seen as an art form. It really is. And I love that that's what's come out of it. I love that people with mastectomy scars are getting tattooed now, and, you know, people with all kinds of you know, that would never do this stuff before. You know, it helps a lot of people, and, you know, there are some shitty things too. Lots of shitty tattooers, lots of shitty work that I have to cover up because everyone comes to me for that.
At least you're not doing watercolor tattoos to cover that up.
Yeah, exactly. But it keeps me very busy. But yeah, I think overall it's a good thing. Tattooing is for everyone, you know. It's been around since the dawn of fire. You know, you can't keep it back.
Yeah, I mean, what was that, 2005 on me, that Miami Ink came out? I think it was 2005 because I was just about to graduate high school, or I had just gotten out. That's not a joke. No, but because I remember. No, stop.
Someone check his ID, please.
But
I
it
don't
was
think he's
because
logged
it was such an imperative moment, because I remember when I remember seeing the commercials for the show starting, and that was like I had been hanging around shops and cleaning toilets and stuff at shops, but I had never seen any other shop besides that shop I was hanging out at. So I always wondered, like, how much of that first season was like scripted, or how much of that was like
It was
real?
all scripted.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, regardless, you got to see Garver tattoo for free, and I was like, dude, this is sick. I never seen Takobra like that, but yeah, I mean, I think nothing but good things really happened out of it. It created a lot of good tattooers, created a lot of bad tattooers, but that, who cares? I mean, it spawned a lot of other TV shows and replicas and stuff. And I remember there was this time, like around 2008, like every shop I would go visit a friend at, like they were like shooting a pilot. Like every shop I knew was like, oh yeah, we're gonna do it. But yeah, that was weird. Like everybody wanted to be on TV. I remember too, like the first year of my apprenticeship, everybody called me Yoji too. So that was hilarious too. But I had to get used to that. I mean, but yeah, I mean, nothing but really good came out of it. I mean, just like anything, you realize as you get older and how if you are ever around media or anything like that, like that show was geared towards the general public and people. It wasn't geared towards tattooers. And that's still the same complaint you hear nowadays too with like Ink Master or whatever else is out there. It's like, oh, that show sucks. It's like, it's not for you. It's for just regular people, man. It's like, you think fucking there's that much drama? If there was that much drama in one shop, like, I don't know how it would be open for that long, though, too. You know, it felt
There's plenty of drama in the shops.
Definitely.
Oh my God.
Definitely,
1,000
but,
times
like,
more than that shit.
Definitely. But,
It's like a nail salon.
it's essentially exactly what it is. But, you know.
You know, it's funny because I think
There's
in the
TV
beginning-
drama and there's real drama. But
yeah, in the beginning when there was obviously these producers never been in a tattoo shop. They didn't know what a tattoo shop does. How does it operate? What do you do? The customers walk in. I'm like, listen, if you're waiting for fucking customers to walk in, we're not gonna have a show. It's like, because customers walk in about 3 times a day, 4 times a day if you're lucky in a tattoo shop, unless you're in a really busy street shop that's really well known and as established as a street shop. And those were not a dime a dozen. Those were really hard to find, you know? So the only thing I could come up with, I was like, listen, we need to cast these people because we don't know who's going to walk in, whether you're going to have an idiot or whether you're going to have a good personality or a character that's going to be able to carry themselves in a scene, period. I was like, and another thing, I was like, we usually when we're tattooing, we don't talk. Well, like, unless you have a really good conversation for me to talk to you, well, I'm not going to talk to you. It's not like we all get along. It's not like when you get into a bar, you're just going to start talking to the person next to you because he's next to you. Sometimes you're going to talk to him for 2 seconds and be like, okay, that conversation's over. So the worst part that came out of this whole thing was that I had come up with this stupid fucking idea that the tattoo should have a meaning and a story because we need to talk about it. Because
It's his fault.
Thanks, man.
I am responsible for that, but because you got to understand, I knew that people would not relate to just sitting there watching me tattoo. They're not going to relate, and they're not going to even accept tattooing yet. There would have to be a reason why all of a sudden most people that walked around and be like, I can't believe you got that portrait on you. Why would you even get a portrait? Who does? Why would you get a dead person tattooed? That was really what most people thought. And then all of a sudden, I thought about, you have to relate something. People have to feel like they can relate to why you're getting tattooed. So, unfortunately, I had brought this old friend of mine, and she was a girl that we went to school together, and I was like, listen, just get a daisy on your toe and tell them that your grandma's name was Daisy. and this is how we shot the pilot, right? And she was really cute.
Smell the money.
And she was so... she was just made for TV in a way. And she was this French girl that I grew up with, and she was like, yeah, my grandma's name was Daisy. She passed away last year, and she passed away like 9 years ago. And she was like, and she was like, her name wasn't even Daisy. It was like Anne-Marie, and I was like, we're going to put a daisy on your toe. And they swallowed it up. Now, I never knew that was going to be the base of the show, but I knew that was like kind of like a fish hook to reel them in, to be able for people to relate to why some of us get tattoos. Some of us don't even give a shit what we get tattooed. I'm like, I went in, my first tattoo on my leg said punk rock. Miami punk rock, like that was my first tattoo. And so it had nothing to do with like, you didn't have to have a reason to like a dragon. You might have just liked dragons. But that wouldn't have worked. So we had to kind of create this thing that ended up the biggest fucking curse, because I signed up to being a tattoo artist, not a psychiatrist. And from that point on, it seemed like for the next 10 fucking years, every person that sat in my shop had a spiel to give me and a story of somebody died or somebody, and it made me stop tattooing for 2 years because all I could relate tattooing to at that point was to death, because I became like this person that will help you through heal you through your tattoo.
Me too.
Now we all have.
It was horrible.
Everybody thought you were Morrissey,
Bring
man.
us a book now.
Yeah.
Here's my life. Please interpret that into what I need.
I'm so sorry, guys.
Well,
I'm so sorry.
I don't mind it. I like it.
I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to us.
so gravity's given me the "you're almost out of time" signal, but so I'd like to. Oh, I was about to say that. So I was thinking we could go into questions right now. So if somebody has a question, please raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. Or maybe this.
Sorry. The lovely lady from London town over there, what's her name?
Roxx.
Can you talk about, I guess the only people in tattoos that I would be afraid of are probably Dennis Rodman, but I think other types of celebs, not named Dennis Rodman, don't scare me in tattoos. And can you talk a little bit more about your experience in Amsterdam or like with European tattoos? Because I'm a huge fan of like, since you're not that far away across the river in London, I'm a big fan of Irish tattoos, and I find people like, say, Elizabeth Salander and the dragon tattoo empowering, even though I'm not a tattoo kind of guy.
So are you saying you want me to talk about what it was like when people were really scary more? Or European tattooing?
Like, I guess your experience in Amsterdam, because you were talking about how
okay.
how
I'll tell you about
You were
Amsterdam.
afraid of opening because you were afraid of opening your shop.
Oh, yeah. So I moved there. I was getting out of a relationship, and I wanted to move somewhere else. Went to Amsterdam on vacation, loved it. I really loved that. I think that was one of the first places and one of the few places that tattooing really was considered an art form. Before, I think, I left the UK because, people just, I don't think that people were treating it like that then, and that was in the 1980s, okay? Early 90s, mid 90s, Amsterdam was so much more advanced, mostly because of this very famous, very well-known tattooer named Hank, which I talked about earlier, who has done so much for tattooing, and I think he really educated the Dutch on the fact that tattooing was an art form. So it was a great place to go if you were the kind of tattooer that wanted to get arty with stuff. It was also a great place to go if you wanted to get really fucked up on drugs. I personally wasn't one of those people, but I remember so many of my American tattoo pals being shipped back home to their moms. Really fucked up. So I moved there. I got a job tattooing in a kind of gangstery shop. There were no women tattooing at that shop. I think there was only maybe Louise Schiffmacher tattooing and this woman named Rhonda from New York who was tattooing at Tattoo Peter, which is the second oldest tattoo shop that's still running in the world. So I worked at this kind of gangstery shop where the normal split for tattoo artists is 60-40. They gave me 40-60 because I was a woman. So I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to take it anyway because I needed to get my foot in the door. I worked there for about a year. That was the place. When I left to go to Tattoo Peter, they told me that they were going to break my hands and beat my girlfriend up. I left anyway. And I found a really good home at Tattoo Peter in the red light district for a long time. It was really cool to tattoo at one of the oldest tattoo shops ever, that's still going. It's been open since 1955. I did a lot of barbed wire armbands. I fucking
Anthony
did so
Kiedis
many
one?
dolphins, man. I can't even remember. I tattooed like 30 Russian soldiers. I mean, I did like the old school thing there. Yeah, it was super gangstery, super run by organizations like that you needed to ask permission for to do things. And, it's not like that anymore, I hear, but there was one story I heard about a guy who opened up a shop without permission. And I was just telling a client this the other day, but he came home and I think he found his 2 dogs hanging from a light fixture with their throats slit. So, I mean, it was kind of the thing, you don't step on other people's toes, But because of the tourist industry, tattooing was, people would line up outside that shop. You would come in at 11 o'clock and you'd have to fight your way through to get to the tattoo part because there were so many people waiting to get tattooed. So that was my experience in the 90s there. Yeah.
Hi, my question's for Ami. So first of all, I want to say I can relate to the story about your father because I had a similar experience with my uncle, and people just fell apart when they saw his tattoo and said that he couldn't be buried in a Jewish cemetery because of his tattoos. So my question is, how are people with tattoos now and tattooing in Israel? Do you know, or do you go back there, and has it been normalized yet?
Wow, tattooing in Israel? There's a tattoo shop every 3 stores in Tel Aviv, probably. It's, at the time when I was there, when I went there in '89 and I went and got tattooed, there was only one guy in Tel Aviv tattooing, and his name was Ofer, and it was a body line tattoo. And him and his sister were both tattooing in there. She was a tough lady too. She was first of all, she was a lesbian woman, and she was a tattooer, so that was not easy already. And her and her brother pretty much were the only tattooers in Tel Aviv. And I got a tattoo there in 1989, and it was a terrible tattoo. It was a terrible tattoo, and I ended up covering it. Mike Wilson actually ended up covering it like 15 years later. But it was really, really different back then, like the store was in the back of a building where you walk through this apartment building, and the last apartment in the back was allocated to a tattoo shop. Today, you can walk in Tel Aviv, and literally every 4 or 5 stores, there's a tattoo shop, and it's almost through all of Israel for a place that, tattooing is not supposed to flourish. There's hundreds of shops in Israel, and we're talking about a place that's smaller than New Jersey. But remember, there's a huge history of tattooing in Israel. There's a huge history of tattooing in Jerusalem. There's the Razzouk family that have been there for 40 generations tattooing. They've been tattooing there for hundreds of years, and you got to think about that is a pretty cool lineage to have there. I make it a point to go visit them every time I'm there and still see how they're evolving in tattooing. They're still sticking to the same kind of designs that they've always been doing, which is really cool. So if you wanted to go and get a pilgrimage tattoo, you probably would be the only place in the world where you could actually get it done. And I was very lucky to get a few of the blocks that they actually have these stamps that they've been using for hundreds of years. The really old ones they keep there, and it's kind of like behind this glass museum case that they have. But tattooing's always been there, you know. It's just at one point or another, I think you know, it became such a taboo for Jews to be tattooed, but it didn't really happen through all of Judaism. Ethiopian Jews have been getting tattooed for hundreds of years. It's never stopped. They still get tattooed. There's Bedouins that get tattooed all over the desert, and they live in Israel, and that's still part of their culture. So I look at it and I see how much it's flourished, and you know, it took a while for good tattooers to flourish through Israel, but it's definitely happening, and the level's super high now, and I think there's a lot of influence that's coming from Europe for the last 20 years that's definitely helped. A lot of the Israeli tattoo artists were going to Europe and working in Europe and coming to the conventions and sponging up a lot of the information, going back and sharing it. And yeah, today it's gigantic.
Can I close with a question for Kerry? Oh, okay. What I wanted to ask Kerry, because you had brought up, like, you know, the longevity of certain tattoo shops and also the effect of Hank in Amsterdam. I think, like, for me, like, being raised in Northern California, I think we've all felt the effect of Ed Hardy and what he's done to bring, you know, tattooing here and to promote it. And I think everyone here has been influenced and or helped directly by Ed. Your shop is operating in one of the oldest locations in California, or even more than that.
So it brings up a question. She said Tattoo Peters was second oldest in the world, but
That was still running.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Bert Grimm's is the studio I took over, and that studio was opened in 1927. So
Wow.
it's been continually running since then.
Amazing.
So the influence there, not only from Bert Grimm, but because he didn't take it over until, you know, mid-50s, 1954. So prior to that, all of the artists that came before him and after him, the compilation of all those great artists, you know, who have spread out all over the world and have spread that style, the Pike style, everywhere. So there's a great influence and kind of became a recognizable style to many, many people, the Sailor style, and, you know, Sailor Jerry doing it over on the East Coast, and Bert Grimm and that Pike area tattoo doing it over on the West. And we're trying to continue that history there and continuing to run that shop, and we're currently expanding the museum part of that and adding photos, or trying to find photos of everybody who's ever worked there and put their picture on the wall, and then also, you know, artifacts of tattoo, and trying to find dates that connect to each person and where they went possibly. So we're searching for that, and Lyle was a great help in that. He gave me a list many, many years ago of what he had, and we built on that quite a bit. So we're hoping that we can continue that and keep that history growing there in the Pike area, where the last piece of the Pike left. The Pike was an amusement area in Long Beach, California, where they used to have, you know, like kind of Coney Island style, right? And there was at one time 12 tattoo shops in the area, and they demolished that in the 70s, you know, got rid of everything because it got really seedy. So we're the last remaining building, the last remaining piece, and the only piece of the history of the Pike that is left, except for things like, you know, some of the ride pieces and some of the games and stuff that people have collected. So we're very, very lucky.
I was going to say that I meant Tattoo Peter was like the second oldest running shop in Europe, not America.
Had to make sure.
I think I probably made the mistake.
So actually, I was going to open up and talk about, like, the importance of, like, maybe to the rest of you guys talk about, like, an exhibition like this, and, like, you know, about people from younger generations knowing. I know you have your apprentice training to be a historian as well. So I think, like, let's maybe, you know, everyone can talk a little bit about, like, following, like, the footsteps of people like Ed Hardy or Tintin or, you know, whoever, and, like, really trying to promote tattoo culture and history.
The history's huge. I mean, that's where we come from. And it's not just us, not modern day tattooing as we know it, you know. but prior to that and where it comes from. So, trying to learn. I mean, growing up in school, history for most of us is the one thing we don't want to talk about. We don't want to learn. We don't want to know the dates. But in many ways, it's very important because that's how we grow. We look back and we learn things, and then we grow further from there. So I believe that history is very important. You don't have to remember the dates. You just remember some of the faces and the things that they did and what they went through, and that's why we're here and how we're able to be here today.
It's so important for something like this to exist, especially for the newer generation of artists coming through, that they're getting all their knowledge from social media, like things like Instagram and stuff. So their heroes and the people they look up to are whoever is on there. So for this to exist now, this is why they need to learn about things like this, where you come from, your foundations, and and just taking some of it. That's where we all come from.
Yeah, it's like real life tattooing versus Instagram tattooers.
Yeah, it's like photos lie. Like we can hide our mistakes by hitting a black and white filter and everything, taking that picture 20 feet away, but here you see as raw as it gets, I can remember the 5x7 portfolios, that's still a thing too, but like now your portfolio is online. Like this is what you're selling to. And what is this portfolio you speak of? The 5x7s, like where you still have to sell yourself through a portfolio, where the best pictures always got the most love, but now it's the same rules apply, except on social media now. Like if you have to have a place like this to exist, so people who truly love tattooing and obsess over it, they come here and they learn about this stuff. I learn something new every day. So, yeah.
Hello. Roxx and Kerry, you both talked a little bit about some of the sexism that you experienced early in your career. Can you speak a little bit about some of the changes that you see in how women who are tattooing today might experience their work?
I missed part of that. Can you repeat it again?
How things have changed for women who are tattooing today? How it might be different?
Well, I think it's definitely easier to get into tattooing these days for anybody, but I think in some ways, it's going to be more difficult. But, in the early days when women weren't tattooing, the sex symbol thing, so back then, the women who were fully tattooed, they were in the circus and they were shown as like a burlesque show, right? And then it kind of changes a little bit, and you end up on, only the pretty girls end up on the fronts of the magazines, right? So that's still continuing. The ones who have 1 million followers, on Instagram are the prettiest girls. How is it different? It's easier to get in. Is it any different other than that? I don't think it is.
I mean, I used to work in a shop with a lot of guys in there. You would just be not taken seriously. You were like a novelty thing. I think it's great now. People take women seriously in tattooing. They're not just objectified. You don't have to hear so much sexist kind of stuff. You feel more comfortable in a tattoo shop instead of feeling like you were going to war every day, which is how it was a little bit for me sometimes. Yeah, I think it's really easy now, and that's good.
Definitely easier, definitely more comfortable. I mean, back in the day, you would, when I started tattooing back in the day, you'd hear stories about tattoo shops, and a woman would walk into a shop to get tattooed, for instance, and, they would pull all the shades down and close all the doors and lock the doors, and, you were going to get tattooed. In the United States, it's unusual for a woman to take off all her clothes, right? So they would, you have to take off all your clothes because it has to be a sterile area, things like that. And now, we do everything possible to keep them as comfortable as possible, drapes and screens and closed doors, and, let their friends come in and try to keep it open and comfortable. So I think it's much easier, and the number of women who are getting tattooed these days might be more than men, I really think.
Yeah, I think the last numbers I saw, it was way more.
Y'all have talked a lot about history and like preserving our past and traditions, and I think that there's kind of this tension going on right now between that history and then the growth and the industry changing so much. I'm wondering if you guys have some experiences of that tension, you know, with tattoo schools and apprenticeships starting to look different, things in that.
I think it's a natural evolution. I don't think the change is bad. I just think people aren't familiar with it. So will tattoo schools happen? Probably. Just like it did with hair school, right? They're trying to regulate things. It's probably going to happen. Can we be a part in that and help that happen smoothly if it does happen? I hope that we can, as a community, to help that be better. Do I feel tension? There's always tension in one way or another if things are unfamiliar. So I do feel that in some people there is tension, but we can respect the old and still bring in the new.
I think, there's definitely going to be tension, but I've always felt a little weird about that subject because I feel like if you just stay busy, you have no fucking time to give a shit what anybody else is doing. And every single time I talk to somebody about the tattoo school stuff, it's usually negative and stuff, but there's a tattoo school 2 blocks from my house, and I always forget it's there because it's right next to the pho joint. So, it doesn't exist, but yeah, it's going to happen, and it's going to produce other tattooers. And I've talked to a few people who've graduated the tattoo school too, and they've learned not to even talk about it. Like they end up going to other shops and they never talk about, oh, check out my certificate. So.
I'm not as forgiving.
Me either.
I really don't think that, to get a certificate to be a tattooer in 6 weeks is
30
anything
Gs.
legitimate. I think it takes years to learn how to tattoo, and I think it takes a lot of responsibility to learn how to tattoo, and I think there's so much more to learning about the whole job, whether it's the hygienic part of it. There's so much to learn about tattooing that I think, unfortunately, some of the worst things that happen out of this evolution is tattoo schools, which give you a diploma after 2 months. I don't think you can learn much in 2 months.
I agree.
And I think that's a really wrong thing for you to think that you can open a shop after you got a diploma, leaving a tattoo school after 2 months, and mom and dad are going to give you 20 grand to go open a shop. And I think that's one of the things that we have to try to educate the newcomers, that that's not the way you should learn how to tattoo. To learn how to tattoo, you should probably learn by somebody with some legitimacy that understands what tattooing is.
That is the right thing to do, but this whole era that we're in right now is that I know more people who didn't do apprenticeships than did. And I'm very fortunate that I got a real apprenticeship and learning all the foundations and everything, and continuing to learn too. But for every block in Los Angeles, there is a private studio with a 19-year-old to 25-year-old doing tats and not knowing any of their foundations and not even fucking caring, though, too.
Well, that's allowing us to do a lot more cover-ups.
Yeah, a lot of the things with apprenticeship versus learning on our own. I'm self-taught. Many of us are. 2 years after I had been tattooing, I look back and I'm like, everything I did was bad, right? Everything. So I had to retrain. And at that point, I was in a shop and I was around other people who were doing better work than me, tattooing better, stronger. So it wasn't a formal apprenticeship, but boy, if I would have had the apprenticeship, I wouldn't have had all those bad tattoos. I would have gotten it right the first time. I would have been putting out good work right away, and I think the basics of tattoo are really important, and we do have to teach that more of a one-on-one or in a small community.
And learning from somebody legitimate, too, because you can get an apprenticeship from anybody nowadays, too, if you just pick up a broom. But
I don't know if it's that easy still. I don't think it's that easy, even now. I think that's why there are private studios every 5 minutes, because people won't teach other people. And I think it's important to educate the clients, honestly, because if we can educate them, then they can differentiate between the 19-year-olds who are cross-contaminating everything and giving people infections. And if we can encourage people to really do their research about the great artists that are out there that are doing things right, I think that would really help a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. If we teach them, we have to teach our clients and talk to them even while we're getting tattooed. If we're explaining to them what we're doing and why we're doing it, they'll pass it on to other people who will then know, oh, I got to make sure, that all of these steps are being followed to make sure my tattoo's being done clean.
And I think with a lot of things in life, it's a matter of perspective. Where, like, for example, like I don't think any one of us owns tattooing. It's like a worldwide phenomenon, and I think all of us have come from some sort of a rebellious background to where we don't really want to listen to what we're told, but we can also control what we do. And I think to that effect, things like, coming here, like all 4 of these people would make more money if they were at home tattooing rather than being here doing a panel, or supporting museum events or doing things like that are educational. Well, yeah. Well, aside from the TV star, the rest of, or like, Tintin throwing a convention and inviting, the best tattooers to showcase what good tattoo art can be. So I think that's like, there's a certain point to where we can't control what everyone does, but everyone on this panel, they've made a marked effort to like help educate and share some of their time with the public.
So thanks for doing this, first of all, and thank you to the museum for hosting it. I've been getting my bodysuit tattooed by Shinji for the past 4 years, and I have, as a white guy getting a traditional Japanese tattoo, I've been confronted, not too harshly, about the idea of cultural appropriation. Roxx, I know you had mentioned it with the Polynesian stuff, and Taki, you also just said tattooing is for everyone. So I was just wondering where you guys kind of come down on the cultural appropriation, and if that's even a thing in tattoo. I don't know. You can speak on it broadly, I guess, instead of.
It kind of reminds me on this feud that I was reading about some basketball player dissing another basketball player because he had dreadlocks, and then he made fun of his Chinese characters on his arm, and I think all of it is pretty retarded. If you love art, you love art, and you can love any kind of art. If you're influenced by, Japanese art, then you should be able to get your Japanese bodysuit. If you love indigenous tattooing that's more tribal and a lot of black and Polynesian and whatever it is, then nobody's telling you shouldn't be able to get that because you're not Polynesian. I think it is important that you get the right stuff if you're going to get it and do your homework, so you don't end up, especially when it comes to Polynesian or Japanese things, certain things are made for, there's a story behind everything, right? So as long as you do your homework and get it done right, you'll be able to tell a great story. But none of it is wrong. There's no such thing as right or wrong. It's just if you appreciate art, you should be able to get art.
Sometimes when people get Maori tattoos, especially, they're like stealing designs from people's lineages and their histories, and they're getting tattoos that like say, this was my grandmother. So that kind of stuff gets a bit weird, I think it's a hard subject to breach because I think there is, I think tattooing comes from a culturally appropriative kind of historical place in the Western world. So it's difficult, but it's a personal choice, I think, for tattooers and clients to get it's their body, to get whatever they want. But it's our choice whether we do it or not,
Going to the appropriate artist. So she mentioned different cultures, Polynesian, for instance. So, if you're getting a Japanese suit or you're getting it from a Japanese artist, if you're getting it from somebody who respects that art and does it as well as a Japanese artist, I don't think that matters either. But there are certain cultures that she's mentioned in Polynesian art and things like that it's still very touchy, and it still would be taking something from their culture, where in other cultures you would not.
I think I just wanted to speak on this just because you brought up Shinji and Japanese tattooing. I've had like I remember I had a client who was white be told by another white person like that's cultural appropriation, and I'm like offended by that because I was born in Japan. I have I was titled in Japan. I had a back piece in Japan. I have every right to tattoo whoever I want. If you look historically, Japanese tattooers always Horichiyo tattooed like European royalty. It was never considered this is only for Japanese people. There's a certain amount of respect involved. I would hope that anyone that gets Japanese stuff does a little research. But I think it really comes down to like sort of the respect and how you treat it. Another example, we were in Samoa doing research for an exhibition, and from the prime minister, the head of state, everyone agreed across the board that the tafunga, the tattoo master, has the choice of who they tattoo. I actually wear a Samoan malafia that I earned over 7 days. That the experience was offered to me, and I did it. So same thing. I know Lyle Tuttle's done it, and these are people that went to the right people, that got the approval, that did it respectfully, and I think at that point it can be a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I was
Yeah.
there when you were getting yours for a day or so. It is go to a Maori tattooer, get the real deal and get some bullshit.
You can end up with a clam shucker.
Yeah. And for the record, Shinji's the king of New York, so you're in good hands. Yeah.
That pretty much sums it up. Just go to the right people.
Yeah.
I mean,
Do your research.
Do the homework.
We're out of time.
Let's round of applause for the panel.